This learning lab is about igniting the potential and inspiring excellence, using conversations worth having. How many of you if you could raise your hand, how many of you are familiar with the practices of appreciative inquiry, either having read the book or attended a boot camp? Okay.
Pauses and
Sort of.
share. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, hi, Tara. So we are going to start just with a brief overview of what the practices are in conversations worth having. So as we go through the conversation today, those of you who are not as familiar will have kind of a ground upon which to stand. So we'll do a quick slideshow. So most of us spend most of our waking hours in conversation, either with ourselves or with others. And because those conversations are like omnipresent, they're almost like the water in which fish swim, always going on. And so we're not quite aware that that is what we swim in. That is what creates our moments, whether they are up moments or down moments. And like the water in which fish swim, if those conversations are toxic or destructive or critical, it lowers our capacity to thrive. But if they are healthy and vibrant and clean, like fresh water for fish, the fish can thrive, and so can we. And those words not only affect us and the people that we're directly in relationship with, but they ripple out. Our interactions with one person ripple out and become the interactions for others throughout the day. So the question that we ask ourselves is, how can we be conscious and intentional with those conversations so we can make them conversations worth having that uplift our well-being, our relationships, and our capacity to thrive. And we've discovered there are two steps to this. When we wrote the first book, we just had two simple practices. And the second book, we realized tuning in, taking the time to ask yourself, where am I? Am I what we call below the line? Am I in a place of feeling critical or judgmental? And if I'm in that place, it's pausing for a moment, taking a breath, and getting curious. What's going on for me? What's going on for the other person? What do I want to have happen in this conversation? And then using the two simple practices, which are generative questions and positive framing. And generative questions, basically in a nutshell, they're widen our screen. So when we're not conscious in our conversations, we bring our own tunnel vision to those conversations. And when we ask generative questions, the vision widens. And it widens in typically one of four ways. One, we either make the invisible visible, or we create shared understanding with others. We can generate new knowledge, and we can inspire possibilities. And making the invisible visible looks like questions such as, what does excellence look like here? What strengths and ideas do you have? Creating shared understanding might come from questions like, what outcomes would you like to see? What are you most excited about? Can we check to make sure we have shared understanding on this? Generating new knowledge might be asking questions like, what might we be missing? Are we missing some data points? How did you do this in your previous organization? How can we bring in best practices from other places? And inspiring possibilities are often what if or how might questions. And these kinds of questions shift the way people think and feel because they can see more, and they shift the way we think and feel and the way others do. And then the second practice is positive framing. And that's basically focusing on what you want instead of what you don't want. And we use a technique called flipping to go from a problem or a complaint to a positive frame. And flipping is 3 steps. The first one is to name it, the problem, the complaint, the issue, the thing that you're focused on that you want to fix. And you can often need to hang out and name it for a while, ask some generative questions, make sure you are addressing the real issue or the real problem and not a symptom. And let's use an example. For instance, the team's work is mediocre and they're not living up to their potential. Flipping it is really just the positive opposite. So whatever the problem or the issue is, turn it into the positive opposite. The team's work is excellent. They're tapping their potential. Then the idea is to go from the flip to what is it we really want? If the flip is true, what would be the outcome? What are the results that we're really looking for? And so in our example, it's the team is on fire and pushing the edges of excellence. And so then you might have a conversation. Instead of having a conversation about improving mediocre work and not living up to your potential, you have a conversation around when are we on fire? When are we pushing the edges of our excellence? And how can we do more of that? What are the conditions that make that happen? How does it feel when you're working from that place? So that is in a nutshell our conversations worth having. And we have 2 speakers who are going to have a conversation worth having about this topic of igniting potential and inspiring excellence. So our first speaker is Nancy Kirkpatrick. And she is the executive director and CEO of OhioNet, which is a multi-type library consortium representing a diverse membership that's throughout Ohio and the region. Prior to moving into the library space, she practiced nonprofit law and advocacy. Nancy gets really excited talking about many aspects of leadership, including leading with intention and creating organizations where people can thrive. And she not only is good at talking about it, she is really good at doing it. She's certified in human-centered design and creating workplace well-being, and is currently completing certification as a facilitator in both appreciative inquiry and conversations worth having. She is interested in applying these concepts to work in libraries and higher education. We're very glad to have you. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And Floyd Phillips is a Duke Energy Senior IT Engineering Manager, as well as a certified Conversations Worth Having practitioner trainer and an ICF certified professional coach. He has over 30 years of working in large, medium, and small technology and information companies across various industries. He specializes in organizational health and cohesive team development using Conversations Worth Having and the DISC model. Floyd holds a BS in computer science from the University of Maryland, College Park, and an MBA from the University of Baltimore. Thank you so much, Floyd, for being here as well. We are just delighted that we have you here. So I'd like to get started, and let's get into the heart of the conversation about excellence and high performance. In my experience, every organizational leader wants that. They want excellence and high performance from their teams. And I'm sure the 2 of you are no different. How have you used, or how has Conversations Worth Having helped you to bring out the best performance in those that you work with?
Nancy, would you like me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead. I was like, I don't know who's going first. Go for it.
Who else is gonna go? Yeah, so I'll kind of kick this off. So when I think about how we apply this to teams, right? It's not just the curious questions, right? The curious generative questions are so important, right? They're so important. But along with asking those curious questions, right? It's really, well, for me and for the teams that I work with, it's about how well you listen. It's that deep listening, okay, that goes along with asking the curious questions, right? You can ask a curious question, right? Frame it up right. Make sure you're trying to start it with the word what. What is it's a very powerful word, okay? When you're framing up a curious question, much more effective than a why, maybe, which is a little maybe it gets a little what's the word, interrogative. I'm not using the right word here, but anyway, what's a really great word. But really, the way that you listen, and when we listen to the response from a curious question that we've asked, I'm looking for literally the facial expression, right? The tone, right? How is this being received, right? What are they? What's really going through their mind, right? And I'm looking for all these nonverbal cues. And so I don't just stop with just one generative question, okay? Generally, the problem that we're first talking about is not going to be the real root cause of the problem. It's buried, okay, in there somewhere. So it's, for us, it's typically a series, but we teach our teams and our managers, it's a series of curious questions. Each curious question, deep listening to ask the next question. We go into this deep listening not thinking about what our next question is going to be. We literally form these questions on the fly, right? But it's after observing the behavior and the nonverbal communication from the person that we are talking with. Once you have the real problem, right? And it is a question. What's the real challenge here? Like what's the real challenge for you? That sets up a whole different conversation, right? And that allows you to develop the frame, to develop that positive based outcome that you're looking for. In a nutshell, that's basically the heart of how we use conversations worth having, which of course the wonderful side effect of all of that, if you get into a conversation like that with someone, even if they're charged up, okay, even if they themselves are maybe below the line that particular day, they're not feeling that great, you can watch the emotional wall lower, right? They open up once they realize, hey, this is it's crazy to say, but hey, I'm being listened to. They're hearing what I'm saying, and not just at face value, but they're asking questions, they're probing deeper. I'm being listened to. By being listened to, guess what? People tend to trust you more, right? The trust grows, those emotional walls start to come down, and it then allows you to really build out what that frame might look like, right? And begin the process of flipping. Nancy?
Yeah, I want to second that deep listening. I often say when I talk about conversations worth having that really the secret to me is it's at least half about listening. It's not about talking at all. It's about, and sometimes I have to write Post-it notes and like stick them on my computer screen for myself that say like, be quiet or let people finish their sentence, because I get so excited in the listening. What I say is I'm a deep listener, but I'm not always a good listener, because sometimes I get so excited in what the people are talking about that I jump in and try to interrupt. So I give myself literal visual cues to not do that. Because when you start to listen well and really do see those nonverbals, people do feel heard in a way that they haven't before. And I find that it helps moving forward, you kind of get to that place faster. So it's once that trust is built, you're kind of starting the conversation, 5 steps ahead of where you might have 6 months ago. So I really appreciate the use of that tool. And one of the other questions that I find really helpful is I love the how might we questions. So if somebody is experiencing frustration in a moment, like my question is really like, what would make you feel heard in this moment? Or how might you experience, what does success look like in this for you? Because I think it takes the pressure off of, it's not about the situation. You're really focusing on the individual and saying, what do you need in this moment? And help me help you get there, because that changes their perspective and enables them to more readily accept the whole, name it, flip it, frame it. Like they kind of, even if they know what you're doing, because I do this with my kids more than I do it at work, frankly. They know what I'm doing, but it still works, so they don't argue it anymore, right? So it's the power of that, I think, just can't be overestimated. It really makes a difference. And I love the trust that comes in the relationship once you've really established that. Like I said, it kind of lowers that barrier, it allows you to start farther down the process and get to whatever that solution is in a more efficient manner, which sometimes to me matters. That's like sometimes it is about, yes, also, can we solve this and can we do it fast sometimes? Not always.
I will definitely echo your comments there, Nancy. So I have a 17-year-old daughter. Well, so my wife and I have a blended family. We have 6 kids between us. We got the Brady Bunch thing going. All right. But my two youngest are a couple 17-year-old. But today was their first day as seniors in high school. And it has definitely been a very different experience talking with my daughter about her college, where she wants to go, what she's going to do, career aspirations, how she's handling her senior year. It's been a very different conversation since I started using Conversations Worth Having tools. And it sounds bad, but I started deep listening and using the what and how might we questions. I have 2 older boys, they're 26 and 24, grown out of the house, but it wasn't like that, right? It wasn't like that when, 10 years ago. It was command and control, and, I'm authority, I'm going to do this. And we had those conversations, but they didn't always go well, right? I mean, I got what I wanted, but did I? It maybe not so much. So as a personal, I like Nancy, I love you talking about your daughter getting the personal in it, right? Because it's true. We use this stuff. I mean, it's not just, oh, I'm going to go to Duke Energy, I'm going to teach my teams. No, my wife and I use this. We use it with our kids. We use it with neighbors. We use it with, gosh, if I go to the auto repair shop, right, and I'm a little late, and they're like, we don't know if we can get all this work, squeeze you in. Well, how might we? What can we do? What needs to be, just opening up that conversation. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true. Everything, right? It's used in all places. So it's not just for the workplace. And especially useful on 17-year-old daughters.
What are your thoughts about how Conversations Worth Having might support leaders at different levels of an organization that want to shift or encourage a shift from command and control from senior leadership to one that's more collaborative? How can they use that to kind of support that shift?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, please, Nancy.
Yeah,
please,
so
please.
I am a big fan of just being transparent. So when we at OhioNet started using appreciative inquiry, I was like, hey, y'all, I took this class and learned some stuff, and I think it's really great. So we're going to start using it at the organization. So it wasn't like I was trying to be subtle and sneaking into stuff. I just said, here's the book. Here, and then we hired Michelle, who had been through the training as well. So we had, it wasn't just me, but we were very transparent. And part of that to me was just in the ability to build trust and say, listen, I think this might be helpful for all of us, and here's why. And then made sure that we shared a little bit of the fundamentals with the whole organization so they knew what the heck we were doing. Because I think them having that baseline of understanding is part of what helps shift conversations sooner. And also you will then quickly see maybe the people who aren't going to buy into it right away and might need a little extra convincing. So it gives you an opportunity to kind of figure out like, oh, Cheryl in accounting, we don't have a Cheryl in accounting, which is why I made that up. But somebody is like struggling with this, and it helps you kind of delve in and go, I wonder why that might be. But it really, and I will say, like, we only have 15 people at our organization. So not everybody, I think, buys into the fact that whether this works or not. But what I can tell you is they would all tell you our culture has changed. So whether they believe it or not, they're experiencing the fact that it actually does work. It's one of those, the proof is in the pudding kind of thing. So, but I just started with being transparent. We're trying this. And if it doesn't work for us, we'll stop doing it. Obviously that didn't happen. We've been doing it now for like 5 years, and hopefully they will keep doing it. We'll keep using these tools as we move forward. So
we kind of experienced something a little similar. So when we did the boot camp training with Sherry and Jackie back in March of 2020, we were able to, and this was strategic, I brought along my manager, well, my director, okay, we're very like-minded, but I do have a lot of experience in change management. I know change in an organization it's difficult. Duke Energy is a big organization across 5 states, 30,000 plus people. And part of the strategy for bringing the director was that we were looking for change agents and opinion leaders back at Duke who were like-minded, who could help. We knew that if it was just me, right, standing up, and this is, again, very large, old organization. Duke is not a new organization, right? We're an old power company, okay? So culture takes a long time to change. But we were able to influence some of the other like-minded managers once we got back and show them just the leadership, what we were doing. We were able to get enough buy-in, right? And to Nancy's point, there were people that went, meh, meh. Okay, go meh all day long. That's fine. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do this. And we set up a community of practice within Duke. We had 30 to 50 people, right, showing up once a month to see how this works. And when we started applying it and the leaders saw what was going on, well, they didn't want to be left out. They're like, hey, this is a small movement going on here. And very quickly you realize if you don't want to roll with the tide, you're going to swim against it. And if you're swimming against it, it's like, hey, what's that person doing over there? Why are they going the opposite direction? Right? So I'm not saying it's a perfect plan, but for changing culture, especially leadership culture in an organization, getting the like-minded leaders on board and building a momentum was really important to how we got this culture changed within our organization.
We have a question in the chat. I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce your name correctly. Memon is a coach, and she fully understands generative. Is that right, Memon? She understands generative questions.
Yes.
She'd like you to talk a little bit more about how do you use positive framing to support excellence and ignite someone's potential.
Yes, so I
can jump in. I might have more examples from my kids than I do for my job, but it still works. So what I appreciate about positive framing is that it is really when you're presented with a challenging or negative situation, the positive framing is literally what is the positive opposite of that. And that's something I can wrap my brain around. Like I might not know what the answer is, but if my child is she just graduated from college. So as we were approaching finals, Mom, I'm afraid I'm going to fail my chemistry final. I'm going to fail. So instead of focusing on you're going to fail your final, my question was, what happens if you pass? Like, what does it look like? What is the opposite thing of the thing you're worried about? What is that? And how do you make that happen? So in order to pass your chemistry final, what do you need to do? Let's not focus on the worst thing that you think could happen. Let's focus on the thing that you want to make happen. Both of my kids finished college this year. It's been quite a year. So my son was like, I can't find a job. Everything is terrible. And I said, well, tell me what does success in a job look like for you right now? And he told me, like, I just want to work full time and, make $40,000 a year to be able to pay my student loans. And I said, well, he just finished law school. I said, well, that seems like a reasonable measure of success, because I'm sure most of your classmates want to make 3 times that. So you're setting a bar that is achievable. Cool. How do we help you find a job that meets those needs? But just knowing what that was, knowing what the thing is that they're trying to achieve, helped them both to stop thinking about all of the bad catastrophic things that could be happening. Instead, focus their energy on the, oh, okay, studying for this exam so I don't fail is actually a thing I could do. Getting notes from my friends, watching YouTube tutorials, on the job thing, it was like, oh wait, I'm not trying to go be a partner at a law firm 5 minutes after I graduate. I just want an entry-level job. So it kind of helped them adjust their expectations of themselves, which relieved a lot of stress. But that sort of positive flipping thing it's one of my favorite things. And to me, the question always starts with, what does it look like if, or what does success look like? Or, the thing they want, what does that look like? You tell me what that is. And then also that takes the pressure off me because I can stop talking and just listen.
That.
So just to add a little on to what Nancy just said, yes, absolutely, right? So when I look at the generative questions, right, the curious questions, for me, like, I'm trying to get at the problem because I don't believe that the problem is the problem. I shouldn't say that. I'm hesitant to believe that that's the real problem. It's the first problem, right? So I use the generative questions just to kind of dig in there and just dig and let's dig. Let's figure out what's the problem, right? Once we figure out the problem, okay, now we can frame it and flip it. Okay, now I have what the real problem is. I'm not sure if that necessarily directly answers the original question. But that's how I look at it.
Let me add, Floyd, that what I like about that too is that even once you've named it and you name it, you flip it, you frame it, then you're still asking generative questions to get to the right solution. Yeah. But you're working towards the right thing. So you're not, the fear of not finding a job isn't about like, oh, I won't have a place to live or food to eat because I know mom will take care of that. It's really about like, I don't want to feel like a failure. So it kind of helps figure out what the real issue is, like you said, and then ask good questions it allows you to ask the right questions about the outcome that is sought so that you can help somebody focus on what that is instead of, again, getting stuck in that negative quagmire. So
I love that it helps you ask generative questions that are relevant to where you want to be going. That's very insightful. I have one other question before we dive into opening it to the whole group. Like all of us, I'm sure that you've had team members or colleagues that have triggered judgments or kind of below the line thinking about their performance. How do you manage to have a conversation worth having with them when you're in that judgmental place?
When they're in the judgmental, I'm sorry, so just for context and when they're in the judgmental,
when you've been triggered by the fact that maybe this is the third time you've spoken to this person. Oh, how do you have a conversation worth having about excellence and performance?
All right. Dan, do you mind if I go first?
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yes, please.
So this is going to sound a little canned, but to the point where if I'm on my third time with a performance problem, I have one question I typically ask. And usually I might have asked it beforehand, but maybe in a little different space, but it's, what's the real challenge here for you? And the for you is a very important adder to that sentence. Okay? If I just ask, what's the real challenge? It's that opens it up to other external factors for you. Okay, it focuses it, and it allows me to ask it's an appreciative question. Okay, it's a more direct question. It is, right, but we're getting into the third time here with a performance issue. So okay, and then let them talk. And then, it's a little iterative. You got to listen. I'm observing. I'm being in the moment. But I'm focused on what's the real problem. And there's two follow-up questions I typically ask, which is, what do you want? Okay, so this is becoming a problem, right? This is on borderline HR. So, what do you want? Is this the right fit? Are you in the right place? What do you want? So if you listen to the challenge, what do you want? And then the third question is typically, how can I help you? How might we accomplish this? And that's how I personally have to go into a situation like that. We do have large teams. I had a team, largest team I've had is 25 people. A lot of people, right? That's the best way for me to handle it, is just to kind of stick with those 3 questions. So, Nancy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I like that. And I'm thinking about, if I know I'm going into a conversation with somebody who maybe I might be below the line before I get there, or I'm afraid they're going to bring me below the line in the conversation, I try to practice a little empathy ahead of time and think, like, what might be going on in their world, in their life, or whatever, that is causing them to experience whatever emotion is causing them to not be above the line, and try to keep myself above the line. So it's like just that little reminder of, like, and frankly, if I'm at a place where if I know I'm below the line and I can't get above the line, I am all for rescheduling a conversation for a time that is better for both of us. Because if you can't, like, if you just know you can't get there, then don't have a conversation that's going to be below the line. But I appreciate your asking, what is it that you want, like making that a very specific question, because sometimes what I've discovered, at least at OhioNet, is that what the person's either personal or professional goals are not in alignment maybe with the organizational mission and where we're headed. So then that gives you an opportunity to talk about, okay, that's okay. Like, it's okay to surface that. And if we can't find some sort of synergy between the work that you find fulfilling and the work that we do, then I am always a big fan, and it sounds harsh, but it's really not, of coaching up and out. How can I help you build the skill that you need to be successful somewhere else? Because that still helps my profession. I'm a librarian. We're in a helping profession. So if you can't experience fulfillment here, that's not good for you, and it's not good for us. So how do we help you learn or gain the skills that you need to be successful somewhere else? And then when that person can then do that, there's no hard feelings when they go. And then I now have an open spot that I can help try to find the right person, for example, to fill that need for the organization. So I think I would love to live in a country where we normalize, like, people coming and going at organizations. You don't go and stay. If you go and stay for 30 years, awesome. But if you go and learn stuff in 3 years and then it's time, you've grown enough to move on, like, that's great too. So just kind of normalizing that change is okay. You've learned what you needed to learn at this whatever place. Now it's time to go to the next thing, I think is healthy.
I'll share real quick. No names, this isn't personal, I promise y'all. Had somebody's about to transfer onto my team, and they were about to let this individual go. He was a performance issue. I say that with quotes, performance issue. And I got talking to him real quick. I said, hey, to one of the other managers, let me just talk to the guy, right? He's got some crossover skills that might be useful on my team. 3 questions, really simple. Right? What's the challenge here for you? And he's like, they put me in front. This individual's very introverted. I mean, very introverted. So what do? They put him in front of the business owners, in front of lines of business, and expected him to really actively, almost in an outgoing way, be an account executive, right? And work through the requirements through business process. And he's like, I just want to code. I'm a coder, right? I just want to write my Java and Python scripts in AWS and get on with it. So I was like, I said, what do you want? He goes, I want to code. Okay. Crisis averted. Come on to my team. So the manager was like, well, he's going to go to your team. He's doing quite well, by the way, quite well. He will be doing quite well. We've talked to him, had some interviews. And anyway, long story short, Nancy, that's another example of, right, you can even among your own organization go in and ask the right questions. Right? It's amazing how people just, hey, there's nothing wrong with the guy. He just wasn't in the right role at all, right? So it really helps.
Wonderful. Thank you both. So let's open this up to those of you who are on the call. Do you have questions for Nancy or Floyd? And or do you have a situation that you're dealing with and you're not quite sure, how could I use conversations worth having to turn this into a conversation that really ups the person's game or bring this into my organization. So if you have one of those, if you want to type it into chat, Nancy and Floyd can, and the rest of everybody else, we can turn this into a workshop to work on that. Or if you have an open question, just unmute yourself and feel free to ask. Can be, and
I have a question.
hey, great.
Yeah, thank you. This has been very, very insightful, both Nancy and Floyd. So thank you. And I come from the tech industry, Floyd, so I totally understand. And I love that you mentioned maybe this is not the right fit for you. I have to do that in my job, but not in a staff capacity. And it's the most freeing question you can ask, because you're giving the choice back to the person, and they're, oh, I have actually authority here. This is my life, you know. And I feel if people can own their decisions, they're more inclined to make them. Great on an individual level. What about when departments are siloed? And what about when one department is causing problems for another department, yet they're just siloed? Nobody wants to talk to each other. Everybody thinks they're doing a great job. Yet if we were working together, we could do a better job. And I've tried to have the conversation. I've tried to show the work, but there's something missing. And I wonder, is it in the conversations that I can have that may change that? And if it was, who do I speak to? Do I speak to the CEO? Do I speak to my manager? Where do I start this conversation? I just feel like it would be an amazing organization if we could get these conversations going. So anybody who wants to answer, if you feel like answering, thank you.
Great question. Nancy, you look like you're ready.
Yeah, I feel like you sort of described the organization I'm at now when I got here. So we're small. There were 14, 15 of us, but it was, even among that small number of people, it was like the technology department does this, and member services does this, and accounting does this, and they talked to each other like when they got coffee, they were friendly, but their business units were not working well together. And I'm like, there's like 15 of us. This doesn't even make sense. You all like each other. You all have good conversations. Like, why, when it comes to supporting our business and our members, why are we not getting along? So first I tried just doing like a conversation with the whole org. Like, here's the state of the organization. Here's what I see as a new director. Here are some challenges and opportunities. And that got me a little bit, there was a little bit of improvement. Maybe accounting had a slightly better conversation with member services, for example, but it didn't really get to the heart of the issue. So I started with at the director level, and I said I got the directors together and had a meeting and said, like, here's what I'm observing, and I know this is not serving any of us well. So how can we come together as a team and try to do something about this? And what ended up happening was, we realized that we had organizational values, but we had never taken the time to articulate them and see what it meant, like, for the whole like IT, we're focused on this, accounting's focused on this. So to be able to have an organizational conversation about what matters to us, what do we value, how do we serve our members, and see the similarities that came out of every department. Like, every single department it's the member first. We care about the member first, your customer, if you're, not in a non-for-profit. So, and to be able to see, like, oh, we are all actually trying to accomplish the same thing, which is the best experience for our member, and allowed us to look a little bit more closely at where are the disconnects happening and what can we do about them. And so it ended up resulting in people sharing more information more freely, and not just assuming that a decision they made, wouldn't impact anybody else. So it enabled them to have conversations with each other. So now, if the accounting team wants to change accounting software, they don't just change accounting software. They talk to everybody who's touched by that change and say, we're considering this. How might it affect you, before they do it? But starting at the director level and then allowing them to take it to their teams and then coming back for one big conversation is what worked for us with a smaller team. I don't know how you would do that across a larger organization, but I bet there are ways to get it done.
Yeah, Rachel. I mean, that's, I was listening to your question. I was like, do you work at Duke Energy? Okay. Because, even within our organization, we probably have 8 to 10 different silos going on. And it's baffling, right? Why this happens. The only thing that I can, Nancy did a much better job speaking to it than I did, but it's how far up in the leadership chain can you go, right? Where you can get support, right? And begin to allow it to kind of trickle down, right? It takes a long time. I mean, Conversations Worth Having took about 2 years to really catch fire, right, at Duke. It's just a slow change. People don't like to change, right? It's just a thing. So, but the higher up that you can go to get support, we try to get on the director staff calls. We've done presentations so that the other directors, the managing directors, right, get a full view. The CIO has been presented to, like, the CIO staff understands how this works. But sometimes you get people that are like, meh, nope, I'm not going to do it, right? Like we talked about earlier, and it's hard to get to those people, and you may never get to them. It's reality. But you get to the folks that you can get to by building support in your change agents, opinion leaders, people that embrace it and use it. It's grassroots type stuff.
Great.
Sorry, it's not like can't give a scientific step-by-step answer to it, but.
No. I think I got something from that. It's like, how would I like to communicate that? And if I could present it to somebody, then that would probably be heard more. I think it's very important, even in my job, take a step back to go forward. And we're always stuck there because if we stop now, everything will fall apart. But no, maybe it'll be better, like reframing it, like Nancy was saying, So yeah, thank you. That was insightful. Appreciate that.
Sure.
We have one other question that I think is a wonderful question. This is it Boss? Boss? Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. It's Boss, by the way.
Boss, thank you.
Well, the topic I think came up a little bit in the conversation maybe, but how can you integrate also giving feedback in a conversation worth having? I know you want to stay away from passing judgment, but sometimes I think you can very also objectively state your point of view and what you observe and still be open to a different perspective from somebody else, where you can use generative questions to investigate how the other person is looking towards it. So what is your experience in how you can integrate giving feedback into a conversation worth having?
Nancy, mind if I take this one first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I hope this answers your question. I can only speak to my experience. What we started doing about 7 or 8 years ago was we started using what we call the 4-question, it's for no better words, the 4-question technique for giving feedback. And that's four questions. What can you keep doing? That's what. Notice the word what. Sometimes it's substituted with the word how. It's okay. What and how. Great words, right? What can we keep doing that's currently working? What can you keep doing, but maybe do a little differently? What could you stop doing that's maybe not adding as much value or having the effect that you thought it might be having? And what can you start doing that we're not currently doing that could add value? Now, those might seem like 4 kind of just questions, but the point of using those questions with the word what and the hows, remember the emotional walls, right? It lowers it. We're starting down a path that's not accusatory. That's the word I was looking for when I was struggling with the word earlier. Accusatory. Why tends to be a little accusatory. Okay. It was bothering me. Anyway. So using those 4 questions, right, enables us to start the conversation if I have to give somebody feedback, right? Or even if I have to ask for feedback, which I do regularly on myself, I can use those 4 questions. And it just sets up a less emotional, right, conversation with our tones and the way we're about to package, right, that feedback. Less accusatory. Nancy?
It looks very interesting to at least to open up the reflective mindset of somebody to look at their own performance and and ponder upon that based on those questions. But next to that, you also have your observations in seeing the person doing work or experiencing some of the consequences. So I was looking more towards that part. So not triggering the introspection of somebody, but also mixing that with some of your own observations, which might be also on the very positive side, and sometimes a little bit critical observations as well. Not to present them as the truth, but also as part of the mix that is out there that you would like to address together, to find again this positive outlook to see what you might, how you might resolve or improve that together. Understand what I mean?
Yeah, well, this resonates with me because it's a thing that we were trying to do. So when I used to work at the organization that I think it's Jenny is at now, I'm trying. Yes. So we had this thing called the JPNR, which was really interesting. It was once every 6 to 8 weeks as an employee, we filled out this really long form in triplicate that highlighted what we've been working on, our frustrations, where we wanted to improve. It had, you hear the projects I'm working on over there. And I found many parts of it useful, but overall, like it was when I went to my new organization, I was like, how can we take this form and update it and make it a little bit more useful and apply an AI lens? So we created, I'm looking at it right now, I just pulled up on Canva because we're just getting ready to launch this at OhioNet. We created something that we didn't want like a feedback form because does anybody ever want to actually get feedback? No, I mean, because you just assume that it's going to be coming from a negative perspective and it's not. So we created an employee quarterly accomplishments form. So I'm in nonprofits, but I get the business world and we care about key performance indicators even as a nonprofit. So we took our 5 top KPIs, key performance indicators. We kind of put what they were. So for example, members is our first one. And there's 3 like highlights under that: demonstrate member focus, consider members in our decision making, further OhioNet's vision. And so there's a box where we can put, as a manager, I can put, here are the things I have observed my employee doing in the last quarter that support that, or they actually can fill that in. And then we have a space to put comments. So my employee will say, here's what I've done in the last quarter that supports this KPI. I have the opportunity to affirm it or say, yes, I've seen that, and here's an area where maybe you've had a challenge. So it's a way to kind of do the both and. But we also have a reflection piece at the bottom, which I think is the more important piece. That is, tell me about your proudest moment this quarter. What did you do that really energized you? What was the highlight? So we talk about the highlights, but also, are you experiencing any frustrations? If so, could you describe them? So we're giving them a place to talk about the positive and the negative, where we can also comment on that. And then after the frustration question, literally the next question would be, is what would be the positive outcomes of this situation if we could flip it? We are literally working, name it, flip it, frame it, into our feedback form to help them go, oh, yes, I experienced this frustration, and what would it look like to not experience that? Because then it helps us figure out steps to help them make that thing better. So we're gonna try all this. I think it's a 5-page form, but it's because it's full of pretty graphics and whatever. But I'm really curious to see how this helps our team potentially deal with those kind of things better. And frankly, my whole thing is, if we do this quarterly, and when it comes time for annual reviews, all you have to do is pull out the 4 forms and go, here's all the amazing things you've done this year. Here's where I've seen improvement. And yes, you should get a performance, merit increase or whatever as well. So it's got like all the data is going to be in one place.
That's wonderful.
Nancy and I are going to be getting together after this. She's
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, we're happy
Nancy,
to. I feel like anybody could adapt it. Again, this is our first iteration. It took us a year to get here, but I am looking forward to seeing if it has impact.
Boss, I think another, this doesn't work for all things, but again, it's that using in giving feedback, if the focus is on growth and helping to tap into the person's potential, that by itself can reframe the conversation. So instead of about correcting behavior, it's about, how do we move towards achieving what you want? And there's a practice that we teach called feed forward, which is just 2 simple pieces of information. And what we found is that organizations that adapt feed forward tends to encourage people to actually seek out feed forward on a more regular basis. So the two questions are, what about my performance do you like? Or what about this proposal that I've got in draft form resonates for you? What's working? And what suggestions do you have for me to be even better, for my performance to improve? And so it's in this context of, here again, it's very similar to what Floyd was talking about in terms of what's working, where you can improve, what's not working. But those two simple questions, what we've found is that when people ask those questions, not only of their colleagues, but their supervisors or managers, they get the kind of feedback that helps them improve incrementally on a regular basis. And by doing so, it's its own positive feedback loop. It's like, oh, I know what I'm doing well, and I know what more I can do to be of even greater value. And so it tends to shift the culture towards seeking feedback instead of avoiding feedback. Jackie, do you want to add anything else about either feed forward or any of the conversation that's gone on so far around? Any tips you'd like to add?
No, I've been adding tips in the chat for everybody. So when I hear the questions and commenting, so I've been working the chat. And, you know, I don't know if I heard this, but just remember, this takes practice, practice, and practice. And as we were talking about early, sometimes you're going to fall below the line, and just remember to tune in, pause, breathe, and be really curious. And you can always ask for a do-over conversation, because we all fall below the line. And a do-over is, you know, what are the facts? How do I want to approach this together? These are questions you ask yourself. And sometimes you are the person that needs to ask for the do-over. And sometimes you have to go, and we talked about this at our last learning lab, is you can manage and lead up. And sometimes you have to step into a situation and ask for a do-over for the person that has a very closed and fixed mindset. So just, you know, it just takes practice.
I love do-overs. I think they are so powerful, because if you, especially to me, if I'm the one that in my head, I'm like, I messed up here, just to be able to say, hey, can we pause for a second? I have just recognized how I am not making this an appreciative conversation, and I just want to start over. Like, can we, it's first, people's reaction is like, did that just happen? And then when they realize that you're serious and you're sincere, and you come back and say, here's how it can be, it's amazing to see people really respond to that, because they're like, oh, you recognize that you're human and vulnerable, and also maybe that you've done something, you've made a mistake, or you want to make this better. So the power of a do-over, I think, again, it's just huge. It's huge.
I will echo what Nancy just said, right? The humility that is required, right, to do a do-over, right? You're signaling to the other person, I'm listening, I care, right? Let's do this right. Lowers the emotions. I just had a do-over conversation. Again, that's a reference to 17-year-old daughter. We had a total one where I fell on my face. She brought her SAT scores into me, and my facial expression gave it all away, and she was very upset. And so I said, okay, I think it's time for one of those, Jackie and Nancy, oh yeah, the do-over. I think we need a good old-fashioned do-over on this one. And it just, I think you come out stronger, quite frankly. I think the relationship is even better when you do a do-over, an authentic do-over.
Yes.
And there's power in having that come from the leadership team. Like, I think, I mean, I think they're important and impactful anyway, but to see the leader of your organization saying, I made a mistake and I would like to fix that, is even more significant than it demonstrates that you really mean what you're saying from the top down.
Yeah. Instead of looking weak, you look so much stronger. Yeah. So thank you so much for all that you've shared. I've been capturing the tips. And just to kind of give a summary of all that you have shared, in order to ignite potential and inspire excellence, be genuinely curious in your questions that you ask. Listen deeply, not only with your ears, but your eyes, with empathy, with your heart, so that people feel heard, and it builds trust. Ask questions to expand your thinking before converging. Make sure you've got the real problem. Ask how might we, and what do you need? Be transparent. Tell people what you're doing. Share the fundamentals with them so that they can foster conversations worth having with their colleagues. Enlist fellow champions for change. And if you have silos, go as high up as you can in order to start the conversation that begins to find common values and commonality that will cross-pollinate the conversations across silos. Focus on the thing you want. What does success look like for you? Positive frame helps you ask better questions that support that forward movement. So where are we going? What's desired? When you have challenges, tune in, pause, breathe, get curious, and then step back and ask, what is the challenge here? What is it that you want? And if you're really triggered, reschedule the meeting. And it's perfectly fine to coach up and out if that's what's required. And then for giving feedback, what can you keep doing that's working? What can you keep doing but adjust? What can you stop doing? What can you start doing? Create an employee accomplishment and feedback form, which focuses on what people are doing well, where they can improve, and then use those quarterly reports to look at an annual reflection on their growth and current opportunities. If you want to learn more, our website is full of resources, videos, articles, podcasts. We offer both on-demand boot camps as well as virtual boot camps. And then we have a game, Shift This, which is a card game that helps really up people's ability to ask generative questions. And if you want to reach out to either Nancy or Floyd, here is their email address. Nancy does training, keynotes, and her expertise is in libraries. And Floyd also does training, coaching, and his expertise is in the world of IT. So thank you so much for joining us. And this will be available on our YouTube channel for rewatching or sharing with friends or colleagues if you think it would be of value to them. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, y'all.